Over to Dr. Tlai.
Thank you, Dr. Victoria. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this third conference. Thank you very much for joining us on time. So as you got the invitation or the agenda, today's discussion involves a number of presentations. Maybe we can quickly go through just the schedule. Maybe Henok can display us here, just to see the skeleton of it. Henok?
Yeah, the agenda is on.
The agenda, okay. Yeah. Thank you. As you can see, is everybody looking at it?
Yes, please go ahead.
Fine.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes,
now it has come
see.
to me. So these are today's agendas. Well, the first, I will be the first moderator, along with Chelsea from KIX Hub team. And the chat room will be moderated by Argao. He's also the consultant in the KIX Hub. Then the welcoming is there by respected Abian, and presentations of the findings by Dr. Victoria, and other presentations. For the interest of time, I think we will jump to the next session. Thank you. So I think the next session will be, I'm not quite sure whether Abian is around or not.
I am around.
Thank you very much. I think he will be providing us a welcoming or opening remark.
I will.
Abian is the regional advisor for education at UNICEF, Eastern and Southern Africa. And Abian will be giving us opening remarks and sharing the objectives of the meeting as well as the outcomes. Thank you. Floor is yours, Abian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As was mentioned, my name is Avian Rana. I'm the Regional Education Advisor for Eastern and Southern Africa for UNICEF, and would like to welcome everybody to this meeting today. So dear colleagues from UNESCO's International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, or UNESCO ICPA, as it is well known, the African Union Commission, UNICEF's Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office colleagues, and UNICEF Africa Union Liaison Office based in Addis, the International Development Research Center, IDRC, and dear country focal points and partners, distinguished guests and participants. Good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, or KIX, better known as KIX Hubs, consortium partners, I am very pleased to welcome you to this third online meeting of the Hub's country focal points and partners, intended to present the key findings from the rapid assessment undertaken to identify the current institutional needs, priorities, challenges, and possible solutions on evidence-based policy development on the themes, and there are three themes: early childhood education, gender equality, and learning assessments. I would also like to take this opportunity to make a special mention of the new team members that have recently joined the Secretariat of the Hub, namely Dr. Tilaya Kasahun as the team leader, Ms. Chelsea Lavali as the knowledge management consultant, and Argao Korsa as the monitoring and evaluation consultant. Under the coordination of the UNESCO ICPA and the assistance of the technical team from UNICEF, AUC, and IDRC, we are now stronger than ever to take forward the Hub towards expected outcomes according to its purpose to collect, generate, exchange, and facilitate effective use of evidence-based data, knowledge, and innovation for education policy formulation and implementation among the 19 Anglophone African countries. As you may already know, UNICEF Education Strategy seeks to ensure that every child's right to learn is met, and doing so by leaving no one behind, especially the most marginalized. We are jointly working with you to build the capacity to design, implement, monitor, and evaluate gender responsive, inclusive, and risk-informed education programs to ensure that girls and boys, including those with disabilities, complete early learning, primary and secondary education with appropriate level of learning outcomes. You cannot, therefore, imagine how relevant we find the KIX Hub is for our work, particularly on quality evidence and knowledge generation and sharing, and how delighted we are to be part of it. Today, it is quite clear that learning outcome levels are very low in sub-Saharan African countries, both for boys and girls. As an illustration, 87% of 10-year-old children in sub-Saharan Africa cannot even read and understand a simple text, which is referred to as being learning poor. In addition, the unprecedented crisis of the COVID-19 outbreak risks further exacerbating this learning crisis, with significant increase expected in the number of children falling into the learning poverty, suggesting the need to strengthen knowledge and innovation sharing around education responses and best practices so that the learning loss can be minimized. This third online meeting comes, therefore, at the right moment and provides the opportunity to share what works and what doesn't work regarding evidence-based policy development and implementation along the three thematic areas of learning assessments, early childhood education, and gender equality to ensure that at the end, every child learns effectively. In order to define how better to support you, the meeting will also provide a forum to share the details of how the in-depth country mapping exercise will be undertaken. Objectives, proposed methodologies, the role of the KIX Hub focal points, and expected outcomes. We have here eminent experts today invited to provide some insight in these different areas, allowing us to draw lessons, experiences, and key actions that need to be taken to ensure effective policy formulation and implementation for the benefit of every child's right to learning. I do hope that everything that will be shared during our meeting is not going to stay only in the framework of our discussions here. I strongly believe that each one will also share it back home for a better use in our countries. That is also the spirit of the hub and your role as country focal points and partners. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here so that now we can get down to the detailed discussions itself. So over to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Abian. Thank you, really. I thank you very much for giving very inspirational remark, mentioning the purpose and the outcome of the conference today. Then the next will be presented by Dr. Victoria, and this will be moderated by Chelsea. Chelsea, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chile. Yes, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Victoria Kanobi, and she will discuss the outcomes of the public assessment with countries on the themes of learning assessment, early childhood education, and gender equality. And if I could just quickly reiterate, if everyone could please mute themselves and turn off their video if they are not presenting. Thank you, and over to you, Victoria.
Okay, thank you so much, Chelsea. And,
Victoria,
is my
okay.
slide up?
Okay.
Henok,
Victoria, I think you're on mute. I think there's some issues with Victoria. Yeah, there
Are
you
you able to see my slides? Okay. All right. Can I proceed now? You can hear me very well, right? I think let me
Sure.
request
Yeah.
Henok to upload this.
Victoria, they're on display.
His
The slide is on display, yes, and you were
and
on,
then
I think.
I can continue speaking.
Okay.
So I yeah, thank you very much. No problem.
Victoria, I don't think, Chelsea, I don't think this is working.
Assessment that we undertook with the 92
Nope.
basically find out how priorities and institutional capacity.
Chelsea, I think you need to step in because people can't see nor hear Victoria.
As just to give a background.
Victoria, sorry to interrupt you, but we cannot really hear very well. And
There is a note.
also, Henok, we are not able to see the slides on our end. Could you please try to add them again?
You can't see the presentation now?
No.
On display, no?
No, we cannot.
You can see them side, George from Kenya.
Okay,
Yeah.
can
You
you
can
hear
see
me?
Now we can see it. Yeah. Start from the top, I guess.
Okay. Victoria,
Okay.
are you there?
Me?
Okay.
Yes, Victoria, please go ahead. Moment. Victoria, I think she is going to log back on.
Chelsea. I called Victoria. I think she has very slow connection, and she's suggesting that we go to the next presentation, and she'll come back for her own presentation later.
Okay.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
good solution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
over to you, Chile.
thank you, Chelsea. I think for the interest of time, we have to go for the next presenters. The next presenters will be presenting their assessment on learning assessment. For this, the first will be presentation on the status of learning assessment systems in Sub-Saharan Africa by Russell David from UNESCO, Dakar. And Russell David is an expert on learning assessment with the teaching and learning cluster of UNESCO in Dakar. So he has a rich experience in this regard, and he would like to share us his experiences. Thank you, David. The floor is yours now. You have about 7 to 8 minutes, then make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tilaye. Please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you can't hear or can't see the slides. In the interest of time,
I think it goes very perfectly now.
Thank you, that's great. In the interest of time, I just want to add a few words to introduce myself. I'm currently coordinating the Secretariat of Talent, and I'm based at UNESCO Dakar Regional Office for the Sahel, as Dr. Tilaye just said. In my short presentation, I will first of all briefly introduce the context of talents creation, the structure of the network, and its way of operating, and then move on to a quick overview of the current state of learning assessment systems in the region. The challenges related to the implementation of different types of assessment, the opportunities to improve a national learning assessment system, and the needs expressed by countries in terms of capacity to manage these systems. Can you see the next slide? So here I just want to introduce what talent is. So talent stands for Teaching and Learning Educators Network for Transformation. We need to look at the context of the SDGs, and particularly the SDG 4 and the SDG 4 Global Steering Committee. In the Western Central Africa region, back in 2016, a regional coordination group was established, and this group created 7 task teams to look at specific thematic issues. And one of those task teams is talent, to look specifically at issues of teaching, learning, curriculum, teacher training, and learning assessments. In the steering group of the talent, as you can see from this slide, there are several, most of the partners also present here: UNESCO, UNICEF, UNHCR, ANSEFA, CONFEMEN, its PASEC program, the ADEA, particularly through its NALA, ICQN, and Education International. We are currently also in the phase of updating the composition of the group. I will get back later on the SDGs we are focusing on, but just to add a few words on our presence at the national level. So for the context of Western Central Africa, talent has 2 focal points in 19 countries of that part of that region. And those focal points are usually the Director of Learning Assessment in the Ministry of Education, or in the body that looks over learning assessment, and the Director of Teacher Training. But overall, we have been working with all Sub-Saharan African countries, and we had more than 213 participants at Talents Workshop and Talent Studies and other actions since 2016. But what does Talent do? What are our actions? So we have been supporting all the member states of Sub-Saharan Africa through different modalities. First of all, capacity strengthening workshops on issues of learning assessment, looking at different modalities and different issues related to implementation of learning assessment. Studies and knowledge production that take the forms of original research and policy briefs. Action research on emerging issues such as 21st century skills, integration in learning assessment systems, and finally knowledge sharing through online platforms and webinars. As mentioned before, SDG 4 focuses on quality of learning. More specifically, there are 7 associated targets and 3 means of implementation, as you all know. And the key focus of this target is on learning outcomes and knowledge and skills acquisition. 5 out of these 7 outcomes targets that of these 7 outcome targets clearly the quality of learning. A clear concern with the results and outcomes of educational processes. As you can see, here we have 4.1, 4.2, from 4.4, 4.6, and 4.7, and are all related with acquisition of effective skills and basic competencies. To go deep into the topic of learning assessment, we mainly can divide assessment based on its function, which can either be summative or formative. And I think you're all familiar with these terminologies. There is a lot of literature on this, but looking at the function of assessment gives us an idea of what we're going to do with this assessment. Another way to look at learning assessment, it's based on its organization and its sampling and its way of being structured within the education systems. Like, for instance, we have high-stakes exams that mainly have a certificative function. We have international, regional, large-scale learning assessment systems, such as PISA-D or PISA, TIMSS, PEARLS, and in the region, more specifically, SAC-MAC and PASEC. National large-scale learning assessment systems, classroom-based assessment, and finally, citizen-led assessments, such as UESO, who is implemented in 3 countries of Anglophone Africa, or Bekunko, who is specifically implemented in Mali. And the particular, what is particular about this kind of assessment is that it does target as well out-of-school children to monitor literacy level among the population of children and young adolescents. Just to give some of the trends that we've noticed in our work over the past 2 to 3 years, we have conducted several studies and workshops, including an analytical mapping of the national learning assessment system in the region. This study was conducted mainly by analyzing education sector plans, collecting information through a series of surveys, including the support provided in collecting information to the GPE for its indicator 15 that looks at the quality of national learning assessment system. Through this work, we have been able to extrapolate some key findings common to all of the countries in the region. So the first point that I would like to mention is that regional programs, PASEC and SAC-MAC in our case, are well established, and they have regularly taken place over the last 3 decades. PASEC since 1991, SAC-MAC a little bit later. And in this sense, some countries, particularly in what is called Anglophone Africa, are not covered by this assessment, but there is more and more interest to participate in one or the other. On the same line, at least 3/4 of the countries in the region have conducted a national learning assessment since 2015. And this is clearly a symptom of the increasing importance dedicated to monitoring the quality of education. Although a quality gap between the standards of international and regional programs and national programs has been recorded in some circumstances. Another sign that assessment is really high on the agenda of member states and countries is the role of learning assessment system in education sector plans. This role is more and more prominent, and it is also sometimes, quite often, translated into reality, as dedicated structures to manage learning assessment have been set up in some countries. In some cases, this is part of the GPE grant or a criterion for the validation to assign funding. And I can mention here the case of DRC or Sierra Leone.
Sorry, David, you have
Yes.
1 minute.
Okay, I'll try to go quite quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
So we can look at opportunity and needs then to improve the status of learning assessment and its quality. Promote South-South cooperation is indeed a very good practice that should be strengthened. This doesn't mean that a solution valid in a given country can be transferred into another, but countries facing similar challenges can have a positive impact by exchanging a solution. To improve the quality of learning assessment, there is need to train dedicated staff on item design and competency skills. Participation in regional programs sometimes is good in that sense. And finally, I want to quickly talk about two issues, which are dissemination and the use of learning assessment data. In terms of dissemination, a good opportunity is to use different means, such as online publication, and to better target the audience. But going into the issue of the use of learning assessment data, which is extremely important, we have witnessed 4 key barriers to the underutilization of data. First of all, there is lack of ownership in many countries, particularly in terms of regional programs, as large-scale learning assessment are not institutionalized and budget comes often from external sources. This is also true sometimes in terms of the EGRA and EGMA that are quite common overall in the region. There is a slow release of results as data is not analyzed quickly and reports are not published on time. Sometimes this is also due to a lack in terms of budgeting for these functions at the planning level. Finally, the last 2 issues we have witnessed are poor institutional collaborations, as the unit in charge of learning assessment tends to have loose links to issues units in charge of teacher training, curriculum, planning, and monitoring evaluation. And finally, a lack of integration, a sort of tension that was witnessed by different analytical programs between the national large-scale learning assessment and the classroom-based assessment. This often results in a sort of alienation of teachers that are only administers this kind of service, but are not part of the use of the data and are only informed after many years.
Can you conclude, please,
yes,
David?
Thank you very much. I think these are some points. I'm at the end of my presentation and I can answer to all the questions you may have.
Thank you, David. You have presented very, very substantive issue. I hope everybody has learned a lot from it. For the interest of time, I will not repeat or summarize it. And then I think Dr. Victoria is ready now. Chelsea may take the floor and then introduce her. Thank you. Chelsea, over to you.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Tile. Can we try to give Victoria the floor? Thank you, Henok. Go ahead, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the drop in the internet connectivity. It was raining heavily, so that's why. Next slide, Henok. Henok, next slide.
It's on. Can you say it, Victoria?
Okay, thank you very much. So we are going to move to the 3rd slide so that I redeem the time. Now, we did a quick survey to collect data on experiences and best practices and innovations, plus emerging priorities on institutional capacity development needs within the countries that are participating in the KIX Hub Africa 19 countries. So, but the main thing was to try and identify some of what is happening, what is working, what is not working, and how do these countries want the hub to add value to the 6 thematic areas that we've been talking about in all the different inception meetings. And we shared that tool to the 19 countries. I'm on the 4th slide, Henok. And 15 countries responded to that tool, which I displayed. Of course, we thank you very much for the work that you did fill in the tool. And we mainly got this data through our KIX Hub focal points, who did a great job in trying to get us the information that we needed. And a lot of information was provided, but I presented part of it last time for the first 3 themes, which was mainly around teaching and learning. I also presented about inclusivity, and also we presented about about, we had learning assessments, yeah, partly also, yeah. And then this time round, we decided to complete the presentation to talk about what happens in early childhood education and also what happens with gender equality. I'll just recap again on some of the things that we talked about on learning assessment. Right now, I'm on slide number 5, Enoch. I hope you are following. Now, we asked the countries, what are some of the innovations that you have at country level that are coming up or are already exist when it comes to development of evidence-based policies? Now, in learning assessment, they mentioned that, yes, when you see the numbers, it means those are the countries that responded. They responded that 7 of them, that they have got some learning assessment policies and strategies and frameworks that have been developed at a national level, which are guiding the whole component of learning assessment. But only 3 out of the 15 countries mentioned that they had a robust assessment system that they were confident about. So implying that some of the things which David has mentioned could be true. So then some other countries also, about 4 of them, mentioned that they have developed a capacity development program on early grade reading assessment, and they have also trained their key education sector focal points and teachers on how to design quality tests or test items that can be used for both the formative and summative assessment, which David has been talking about. Now, when it came to the innovations around early childhood education, 3 countries had confidently presented it in their questionnaire that they had developed childhood development policies. But what we noticed that most of the policies that had been developed were not resident in the education sector per se. Some were resident in the Ministry of Gender and something else. And of course, I think because there are 3 key players at national level that govern issues of early childhood, that is education, health, and of course, another sector. Now, there was also a mention in terms of the development of teacher training programs and resources. They talked about ECE assessment tools, curricula, standards, and frameworks for continuous professional development, which were mentioned in about 5 countries. And then 4 countries said that they had established ECE centers, which are annexed to the government primary schools, and some of these also have what we call child play centers. This was reported in 4 countries. So that's some of the innovations that we're able to talk about when it comes to learning assessment in early childhood. Now, on slide number 6, when it came to the development and implementation of evidence-based policies around gender equality, 7 of the countries mentioned that they had developed national gender policies, and some of these policies, other policies had been also transformed to be gender responsive. And this was reported in 7 countries within the education sector. Now, 3 countries reported that they had developed specific strategies for girls' education. Others talked about what they call a gender action plan. And then 1 country reported that they have a school safety protocol to facilitate school safety. And then there was 1 country that said for them, the monitoring and evaluation system and the results management system is gender responsive. And then we had 1 country that is trying to make sure that all its teaching and learning materials are gender sensitive. But there were some other innovations that were in the pipeline, which included development of gender policies to address inequalities for people living with disabilities and other forms of vulnerabilities. It was 1 country that was talking about that. And then 1 country strongly stood out, having developed a policy to reduce school-related gender-based violence. I'm going to end in about 2 slides. Now, when it came to value addition, when we asked them, so how do you want the hub to support you when it comes to aspects of learning assessment? 1, they mentioned that they desire the hub to support them with the development and implementation of different technologies that can be used to undertake learning assessment. So They want the hub to create, I think, to support them on different avenues and ways. I know there's a lot of e-learning, and how do you even use assessment via e-learning for both formative and summative assessment. So some of those things are what are being asked for. And then the issue of capacity building on the various assessment methods stood out. And I know David is very good in this, and the colleagues from ADEA and other institutions. Then there was also the aspect of strengthening experiential learning and knowledge across the countries. For those that are doing well, they can also share their experiences with those that are struggling. And now when it came to early childhood, countries requested that they need more support and guidance in terms of how to establish preschools and also develop effective ECD models. A lot of pilots are going on in different countries, but they needed some guidance on how to develop effective ECD models, and then establishment of monitoring and evaluation policies and sharing of best practices around ECD. Then the other aspect was about strengthening organizational capacity to manage and deliver ECD, especially in most of the countries where issues of early childhood have been left to the private sector. Now, I think this is going to be my last slide in the interest of time. When it came to aspects of value addition in the area of gender equality, there was a request to support the countries in the implementation of gender mainstreaming strategies. It looked as if people have not yet understood fully what this whole component of gender mainstreaming in the education sector is all about. So they need guidance and also capacity building to the gender units in the ministries of education, as well as sharing of best practices, especially around re-entry guidelines for girls who have been pregnant and then they want to come back to school. So one country reported a success in that area, so others were requesting that they need guidance on that. And then lastly, support for the education of the girl child and female teachers, particularly in the area of STEM. So those are some of the highlights that came out. The other parts of the presentation, I talked about them last night, and last time we met, and then we'll be sharing the full presentation to you. So I think I request to stop here for now, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for the overview of the remaining 3 themes. Very informative. I pass it over to you, Dr. Tile. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Victoria. So the next presenter will be, as per the program, Anna Nagatia. I think this focus on sharing of country experience on learning assessment as well. Anna, just to say a brief about Anna. Anna is the coordinator of the competency-based assessment for the new basic education curriculum for Kenya, based at the Kenya National Examinations Council. She holds a master's degree in educational research and evaluation and is well-grounded in assessment, national examinations, and curriculum design. So based upon this decorated experience, I think she will share us important lessons. Thank you, Anna. The floor is to you. You have 8 minutes to present.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to share some experiences from Kenya on learning assessment. We could go to the next slide. Just to start and say that Kenya has affiliations with professional bodies for the purposes of exchanging information regarding assessment. That is the Association for Education Assessment in Africa, the International Association for Education Assessment, and the Eastern African Association for Education Assessment. All these normally have annual conferences where Kenya attends so that we can gain experiences of what other countries in Africa and internationally are doing. In terms of assessment, we also participate in the regional assessment, such as YACMEC, and nationally we conduct some national assessments, what we call the monitoring of learning achievements, and we normally conduct these over a period 2-year, 3-year in grade 3 for primary education, grade C for the SATMEC, and Form 2 for the secondary education. Maybe I may not go over through the definition, but it's just for us to really understand that when we talk about assessment, we need to think about what are the learning outcomes that have been set out in the curriculum that learners need to acquire. What are the tasks that will help the learners to acquire or to be able to know that they're acquiring those learning outcomes? And what is the evidence of achievement? How do we, as an examinations council, as a country, how do we know that learners are actually achieving what was spelled out in the curriculum? And what are the tools that help us to achieve that? Then when we talk about the learning assessment system, you can go to the next slide. The next one, we want to talk about the purpose of assessment. And like was mentioned earlier, mainly we find that we assess for 3 different purposes. We want to assess before instruction takes place, just to find out what are the prior competencies that learners have, even as they come to class. Then we also want to assess when instruction is taking place. That's what we call the formative, to be able to get feedback to improve teaching and learning. And then we also want to assess at the summative stage after instruction, purposes for grading and also for certification. Next, in Kenya, we normally use a mixed method approach to be able to collect sufficient data which will act as evidence on achievement of students' learning. And also, we normally use a lot of varied tools to be able to give learners an opportunity. Some learners are best assessed using written tests, others the practicals, and therefore we try to mix all these assessment tools so that we are able to collect as much information as possible. Then we have what we call the formative assessment, and here it is the kind of the process of finding out what learners have been able to achieve in the process of teaching. And we find that in Kenya, we also have examinations that take into account the formative assessment. For example, the newly introduced competency-based curriculum, we are insisting on having more formative assessment than summative assessment, mainly because we have realized that summative assessments lead to a lot of rote running and deny the learners an opportunity to exhibit the competences that they have acquired. We also have what we call the technical subjects. These are home science, agriculture, computer, art and craft, where we have projects that they conduct in their final year of secondary education, and that accounts for the final certification. For our teacher education examinations, we also conduct formative assessment, and that contributes to 30% of the final certification. Then we also have the national assessments that are carried out by the National Assessment Center periodically. This is sample-based, and these ones not only assess the learning outcomes or the learning achievements, but they go ahead to look at factors that affect learning, the home background, the school environment, what are the social issues that are affecting learners, and then after that, we conduct a multi-level analysis that helps us to see, does socioeconomic background affect learning? Next slide. So in Kenya, we are also privy to the fact that we need to make sure that everybody is learning for all. And therefore, as much as possible, we have tried to make sure that even in our assessment, there is inclusivity. So we have assessments that are geared for the regular learners, those that are deemed not to have either physical or mental challenges. Then we also have assessments that are geared to our learners who have special needs in education. To cite in the new curriculum, we have a specific pathway that we call the special needs stage pathway, which is dealing with learners who have multiple disabilities. In the past, we find that the learners who are in these special units or special schools were denied the opportunity to be assessed nationally. But in the new curriculum that is taking place, then we also involve the teachers who are teaching in these special schools in all the examination activities, from the setting of the examinations to the marking of the examinations, so that they also present the interests of their learners. Then, as we do the assessments, we also ensure that modification and adaptations are done so that learners who are visually impaired will get their Braille versions and will also get extra time. Learners who have hearing impairment will get an opportunity to be assessed using the Kenya Sign Language, and also they are accorded some extra time. Learners who have physical disabilities, we do adapt their items, and when it comes to the practicals for the sciences, they are assisted when it comes to the manipulation of the laboratory equipment. Then when we go to the modes of assessment, like I said earlier, is that we use a variety so that we are able to make sure that we are getting the best from the learners, the written tests, the orals, practicals, projects. And currently in the new curriculum, which was introduced 2 years ago, we have also come up with using online assessments. What we do is that we develop the assessment tools and upload them on a portal so that the students or the schools can access them from this portal and administer them in the best way they can. They can print them, they can use the tablets, or they can photocopy, whichever way the school desires. We also use the same portals to give our projects to the technical subjects. Next slide. So as in Kenya, we are interested a lot in the monitoring of quality of education. And what guides us a lot is that in everything that we do, we always ensure that we are aligning the curriculum objectives to the curriculum instruction and also to the assessment. So all these are interrelated in one way or the other. As we monitor quality of education.
Sorry, Ms. Simon, you have only 1 minute to conclude.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and finalize. We capacity build the teachers. We also conduct item writing workshops across the country just to make sure that our teachers get the competencies on how to write good items. And we also ensure that we train our data collectors well. So when we come to use of assessment feedback, we find that after each national examination, we do analysis and then we give feedback on the primary school examinations and the secondary school examinations by writing feedback reports, by analyzing the questions that were poorly performed and how to improve on that. Recently, we have come up with an online platform that is giving feedback to our primary schools on the trends of the examinations and specific areas of weaknesses in particular subjects and in particular topics. And therefore, this is very useful for evidence and for policy making in terms of the school and for accountability. So we find that from the national assessments, we also get data from the national assessments that we conduct at the various stages that I mentioned about grade 3, grade 6, and Form 2. And what we do is that we conduct dialogues at regional levels so that each region is able to look at their performance in a particular subject, in a particular competence, and come up with weaknesses that are specific or that are unique to that region, and come up with homegrown solutions which can help them to improve. So I'll finalize by just saying that we have a few things that are not working well in Kenya. That is the last slide. And one of the things that is inhibiting quality of education is the large class sizes, the diversity of schools. In Kenya, we have quite diverse schools. We have the Asao regions, the marginalized areas. We have teacher shortages. We have conflicts in some areas. We have nomadic pastoralism. And then we have security issues that affect learning. And then we find that our schools depend a lot on commercial tests, which sometimes are not professionally done. And then we also see that our schools rely a lot on reporting formats that encourage ranking of runners, but the new curriculum is trying to address this so that we can be able to give qualitative reporting that helps to improve learning. And we find that the schools are not maximizing on the feedback reports that are normally produced by the Examinations Council. And we are looking into ways of how we can make sure that these feedback reports are beneficial to the country. Thank you very much.
Can you wind it up, Ms. Sano? Thank you so much. Thank you for your very, very substantive and practical learning assessments applied in Kenya. So I think next presenter will be facilitated by Chelsea. Chelsea, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tile. So now we will move to the theme of early childhood education and care. And for our presentation, we have with us today Dr. George Evans Owino, who will make a presentation on what works and does not work in early childhood education and development, specifically in education policy formulation and implementation. Dr. George is the program manager for research at the Africa Early Childhood Network, AFCAN, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for being with us, Dr. George. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for your welcome and for your kind remarks. I just want to go ahead and say a brief about AFCAN. And I just want to say that Africa Early Childhood Network works as a platform to champion and to promote excellence and collaboration for positive early childhood outcomes. And AFCAN does this through 4 main areas: advocacy for protection of children's rights, influencing ECD policy and practice, strengthening partnerships, and sharing experiences and knowledge on ECD in the African continent. My presentation will be structured around 4 key areas. One of them is just to give a background of what we know on the science of ECD, then talk about the current situation in Africa, combine that with progress on what has already been achieved in early childhood development and the opportunities that exist which you can build on. Then look at the CISA ECD cluster, which is the platform for achieving early childhood outcomes in Africa. And finally, look at what works and what doesn't work in terms of ECD policy. Now, in terms of what we know about the early years, we know that the early years are the most important years in early childhood development because these are the years, the first 5 years is when the brain development happens very fast and very rapidly. And if you take advantage of this, then you can yield dividends in the future. Science also shows that investing in early years enhances educational efficiency as well as outcomes. Children who go to ECD centers are able to get good quality outcomes at the end of their educational life cycle. Investing in early years also leads to higher social returns. For example, fewer children in adulthood will engage in crime, will in risky health behaviors, and in other behaviors that endanger life. We also know from science that early childhood improves productivity of workers when they get into the working force, as well as improving their earnings. Actually, World Bank projects that when children attend ECD later on, their incomes increase by between 1.3 to 3.5% in their working life. Then ECD, therefore, is a very important time, it's a very important watershed where we lay the solid foundation for all aspects of human development. I go to what we know. What do we know about the current situation of ECD? We have an opportunity because ECD has been included as part of the SDGs, and the process of inclusion wasn't very easy. Having it there now makes nations to try also to be rated and also be measured on the achievement of these outcomes. Then there are about 57.5 million children of pre-primary age who are not already enrolled in ECD. And this is a cause for alarm, a cause for a rally of action for us to do something that these children can also get this opportunity. Then across Africa, 33% of children who are of age to enroll in primary school are not, only 33% are enrolled. Another 66% is not enrolled. What do we do about that number? Then also the share of education expenditure that's allocated to ECD or pre-primary education is only 3.3% of that budget. This needs to be pushed up. Then also we know that there's a gap in terms of professionals for ECD, the teachers. We need additional teachers. We need about 3.4 million to be able to meet the universal targets of pre-primary education. Then also finally, quality of education, ECD in Africa is varied. Some countries have better quality, whereas other countries have qualities that are not up to standard. The next slide talk about the progress. What has been achieved so far in terms of ECD development? We have currently benefits of the global push for increased commitment to early years. Everyone is talking about the early years, and agencies and governments are committing increasingly to develop the early years. Then we also realize that on our African continent, as well as in our nation states, there's increased ECD commitments, which can be evidenced. For example, at the AU, there's the establishment of the CISA ECD cluster, which is the one that harmonizes or brings together the nations to try to achieve ECD outcomes on the continent. There's also increasing growth in terms of policy and legislation that embraces and defines the roles of states in ECD provision. Currently, about 60% of the states have some sort of policy and legislation on ECD. Then also a growing number of countries, as well as, a growing number of countries are having multi-sectoral ECD coordination mechanisms. I talked about funding in the first slide. Funding, there's now an increasing push to increase this to 10% of educational expenditure from 3.3% currently on average. Then what are the opportunities that exist that we can build on to maximize on the evidence and therefore be able to overcome the challenges that plague ECD in Africa? There is high level of commitment from the Africa Union, which is evidenced in the platforms that have been established to strengthen high-level advocacy. For example, the Committee of 10 Heads of States and Governments. Then also there is global and regional advocacy moments that can be taken advantage of. For example, TCAD, the Japan Educational Forum. Then also there is increased global funding mechanisms that are coming through. For example, the GPE, which we are engaged in now. There's also the growing global action to develop monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to help countries achieve SDGs. This has been mentioned in the presentation by Victoria. And also there's growing interest in nurturing care framework. A number of countries are talking about this, and Africa is engaged in developing a strategy to help domesticate the nurturing care framework in African countries. Already we are beginning with about 3 countries in Africa, and this is going to be rolled out to other countries. Next slide, please. In the next slide, I would like to just talk about the Africa Union ECD cluster, which is really the engine, which is really the hub where ECD issues on the continent will be taken forward. This was formed in the year 2018 in September, and the forum is chaired by the Africa Union Human Resource, Science and Technology Committee. It's co-chaired by Mauritius, which is the convener of ADEA, ICQN, ECD. Then also we have AFCAN, which I work for, as the convener of this ECD network. The CESAD ECD cluster has got a technical working committee as well as 4 working groups in the areas of research, areas of advocacy, and 2 other areas. The next slide, please. On the next slide, we just want to share our experiences on what works and what doesn't work in terms of policy development on ECD policy implementation. In terms of policy development, when you look at ECD policy, policy works well when the process is also well thought out and well implemented. We talk about process. When we talk about process, we're talking about an inclusive process that brings in government, that brings in non-state actors, that brings communities and even all other players in ECD, the private partners, to work together in developing policy. Another thing that we have learned in our process of policy formulation is that for it to be successful, not just the development of policy per se, but policy needs to be accompanied with appropriate legislative support. You can develop policy, but if there are no legislative mechanisms to implement them, they will not work. Then in terms of programming, design, and implementation, the best programs that work are those that are holistic. Yes.
Just 1 more minute, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'll try to finish in that 1 minute. In terms of program design, as I've mentioned, the best programs that work are those that are holistic, that incorporate all the domains of a child's development, health, nutrition, early learning, safety and security. All this needs to be brought together as a package for better outcomes. Then the program also needs to be informed by empirical evidence, has to be founded on the research, based on what works in the research and what doesn't work to be avoided. Then also in terms of programming, the ones that work best are those that are universal, in other words, targeting everyone, although we know that there are important groups that need to be targeted differently. For example, the people with disabilities could be targeted, but within a universalistic approach where everyone is targeted. Then in terms of coordination and multi-sectoral approach, policy works well when all actors are engaged. And here we're talking about government, we're talking about private actors, we're talking about communities, we're talking about non-state actors. And this collaboration is what will ensure that people build on each other's strength, synergize, avoid duplication, and avoid wastage. Finally, in terms of what works, capacity building. Capacity building, the manpower or the workforce for ECD is very important. This workforce needs to be built in terms of capacity, but just training that is one-off really doesn't work. It's important to also build in a process where there will be continuous mentoring and coaching of the personnel so that training, the application of skills is continuous. Finally, to realize that capacity building doesn't exist in a vacuum. Therefore, the professionals in ECD and even the players, the actors, stakeholders need to work together with the communities so that communities are involved in the early childhood development, for it is at the family that children grow and develop. And this includes the involvement of parents in training and implementation of programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. George, for sharing so much detailed information with us. I will pass the microphone over to Dr. Tile for the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chelsea. The next speaker will be presenting the paper on gender theme. The presenter is Miss Anna Muru. Miss Mana Muru is a Zambian that works partnership manager at VVOB, working out of Zambia, but covering the Southern Africa region. She holds a master's degree in political science with a focus on international development and Africa. She has also served as Zambia country program manager, working with the Ministry General of Education to build the capacity of teachers and education leaders through existing education systems, which is VVOB's core works and approaches. So Ms. Anna is with us today. I think that is very interesting presentation. Now I'll give floor to Ms. Anna.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, if there's anybody who is still doubting about why we should be investing in gender in education, there is a very interesting study that was released in 2018, which says that limited educational opportunities for girls and barriers to completing 12 years of education costs countries between $15 trillion to $30 trillion in lifetime productivity and earning. This study basically says that these countries have lost this amount of money because they have not invested in girls' education. So, in sub-Saharan Africa, we have gender parity in primary enrollment, but we have fewer and fewer girls at the level of secondary, and worse still, in STEM or in TVET. So we are losing out a lot of money. Primary education is just not enough to get these earnings up, and it's visible indeed in all our economies. So we are not doing enough to get our economies up and running because we're not investing in girls' education. Gender equality is core to SDG 4, and it's also necessary for the realization of SDG 5. So very, very important that we invest in this. And sadly, in sub-Saharan Africa, we have many countries, well, not many, but a number of countries who are not implementing policies that are conducive to girls' education, and they're giving up on girls as young as 14 because they're not looking at policies, for example, which favor the re-entry of girls after teenage pregnancies. And this means that girls are being punished while boys for the same act are not getting any kind of implication. And so we are basically widening inequality in these countries. Next slide, please. Great. So in terms of process, what works in terms of policy design? Well, when we are designing policies to improve the retention and the performance of girls, we need to be looking at policies that are developed in consultation with beneficiaries. So girls themselves need to be involved, but also users, the teachers, the school leaders, the other educational actors. Also, we need to look at what specific barriers to education opportunities we need to intervene. So we need to look at the context. We need to look at the context in every aspect. Are we looking at rural girls? Are we looking at girls with disabilities? Are we looking at girls, adolescent girls? What are we looking at? So we need to look at the barriers there. We also need to be very aware of what is expected to work. So be evidence informed. What do we already know that works, and how can we contextualize it, but also how can it be scaled up in a way that it can be implemented across the country. It also needs to be the policies also need to look at data. What are we talking about in terms of our target group? Who are we looking at in terms of implementers? Who are we looking at in terms of beneficiaries? We need to have working on solid data. And also we need to look at policies that are achievable. So we need to look at what we can afford and what we can handle, both in terms of human resources, but also in terms of material resources. Next slide, please. Okay, great. Also, in terms of content, what works in terms of policy design is focusing on the area of teaching and learning. This has a huge impact on girls' performance and retention. And one key area within that is gender-responsive pedagogy. So our policy needs to look at incorporating gender-responsive pedagogy and answering the following questions. Is the teaching and learning environment conducive to both boys and girls? The learning needs of boys and girls. Is our educational system taking those into account? Are materials that we use in our schools discriminatory? I think a lot of us will remember having materials in classroom where the girl was always pictured as a nurse and the doctor was the male. So these reinforce negative stereotypes. Also, are teachers able to see that they're actually reinforcing stereotypes? How many times have we heard of a male teacher telling girls, oh, don't worry, this is too difficult for you because it's mathematics and girls don't do well in mathematics? Are these teachers able to then critically look at themselves and see that they're making a mistake? Also, are girls encouraged to talk? Are they being empowered in the classroom? Are they being encouraged to actually respond to questions? Are they encouraged to do sports that they want to do? I think you can all relate to the fact that in many of our schools, there is no football team for girls. So we're basically reinforcing stereotypes in the education system based on cultural practices, but also based on stereotypes that have been formed and that we take with us. Okay, there are some nice resources that I would like to flag on gender responsive pedagogy, which are basically being tabled and being produced by FAWE. You can find them on their website, and there's one also that tackles gender responsive pedagogy at an early age. I might talk about that later if anybody's interested. But anyway, that's something that has been developed to look at the issues of early education, because as the previous presenter said, children's biggest development is within the age of 5. So we need to intervene early. If a teacher tells a child at 5 that she cannot do mathematics, she'll probably believe that. It'll probably be set in her mind the rest of her life. So we need to look at the early years, and we need to ensure that we have interventions, a gender-responsive pedagogy that tackle teachers of the early years. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, great. In terms of content, again, we need to look at the learning environment. Where children learn is very important for them to continue and to be motivated. So again, if we want to increase girls' performance and retention, we need to look at creating safe and supporting schools. So we need to look at whether school leaders, teachers, parents, and the whole school community are aware of the positive impact of supporting girls' education. Then, is the school community trained on how to handle sexual maturation issues? How are these issues tackled in the classroom? Menstrual hygiene. We know that that's a very critical period for the girls, and a lot of girls are lost because of these issues, because there's no wash facilities within some schools, so there's no privacy, there's no clean water, and that hinders the participation of girls. Next slide. Again, for learning environment, we need to look at, when we're looking at policy design, we need to look at school-related gender-based violence. This is very, very critical, especially in some of our countries. We need to ensure when we're looking at the policy that we need to include a component of awareness. All stakeholders need to know that there's a national policy, and if it's not there, a policy and a legal framework on school-related gender-based violence, so that all actors understand their role and what they should be doing about it. And school leaders, teachers, students, and parents need to understand exactly what school-related gender-based violence is and how to report it. Also, we need to ensure that we are articulating the systems for referrals within the country that are available, so that all actors can then understand what they can do to stop this, or to mitigate it, or to reduce it, or actually to fight it. And also, are school premises safe? I think you can relate to the fact that some of our schools have there's been an allowance in certain urban areas for bars to be open next to schools, or for certain military camps to be posted in rural schools with a lot of secondary school girls. And what do we do by that? We're just increasing teenage pregnancies. That's all we're doing. So our policies need to be alive about these things, and they need to ensure that these things do not happen in our areas. Next, please. Okay, great. So in terms of our experience, some key takeaways in having successful policies, and this is not only for the gender and education, this is for many other areas as well. We need to have political will. There needs to be at the highest level the will to dedicate resources and time, so resources both in terms of human resource but also budget, to support policies that are actionable. We need to ensure that all stakeholders are made aware of the policies and their role, the problems that are in our countries, the policies that are in place, and their role as stakeholders in ensuring that these barriers are overcome. We need to ensure that there's leadership at all levels, from the school level to the district level to the county level to the national level. There needs to be leadership. And this leads to the next point. We need to have a holistic and coordinated approach. In many ministries, you see that as soon as you're talking about a gender issue, they'll say, oh, well, we need to speak to the gender focal point. But that person cannot do it alone. Gender should be in everybody's interest and should be in everybody's mind at all times. And also, we need to ensure that we are consistently collecting and analyzing sound and reliable data at all levels, because that will assure that we are going in the right direction. There's a time for course correction. While in reality, what happens is the data is not always accurate, it's not analyzed. And so if we're carrying out a program, we'll carry it out even though it has proven to fail over time. Next slide.
Ms. Anna, you have only 1 minute to go.
This is my last slide. Thank you so much. Great. So what we have found does not work is that developing policies as desk exercises. So ticking the box. So we have a policy, we've copied it from one other country, here it is. And then expecting the gender focal person to single-handedly mainstream gender in education. That is just not possible. Training in gender should be something that is done in every training program for teachers, and there should be regular updates, but also people administering policy decision making should have a good awareness of what it means for them to be in that position in relation to gender. Also, making overambitious plans that cannot be sustained by resources, human or financial. That will not get us anywhere. And also imposing measures without consultation and awareness of stakeholders and users, because that will probably bring us some improvement, but it will not be taken over after the project period. And also collecting wrong data, not collecting data, and not investing in M&E. So all these apply actually to all kinds of policies, but in particular for gender, it needs to be seen as something that is integral to the ministry's work, to any education system. There should not be a gender unit that works in isolation or a gender focal person. It should be integrated in the EMIS system, and so gender should be on everybody's mind at all times. Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anna. I think you have raised very, very crucial issues, important issues. So the next, I think I came to know late that somebody from FAWE is interested to present something related to this.
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have the profile of the person presenting. May you please kindly present?
Dr. Ture, excuse me, just very quickly, if I could just jump in.
Okay.
Just excuse me to interrupt you. We only have about 10 more minutes left,
okay.
And we have been discussing with Victoria. We would like to kindly request to extend the meeting for another 10 minutes so that we can accommodate the question and answer session. Before we give the floor to FAWE, we would just like to apologize that with the schedule, we do not have time for the full presentation. We would like to ask if FAWE could summarize the presentation in 2 to 3 minutes, and that we can accommodate FAWE's full presentation in the next meeting. We really apologize to have to make these last-minute changes, but we really want to make sure we can respect the time of the meeting and all of the participants. So with that in mind, could we give the floor to FAWE just for 2 to 3 minutes, please?
Thank you, Chelsea. So from FAWE.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Teresa Omondi, the Deputy Executive Director of FAWE. Actually, I'll exactly need the 3 minutes because what I wanted to present has basically gotten quite some meat from Anne Muru of VVOB and also the presenter before, Dr. George, I think. So mine would just be to mention on 2 things that we haven't, that wasn't shared during the presentation. So Anne Muru already mentioned about FAWE's gender responsive pedagogy tool, which is in partnership with VVOB. And I would really urge all of us to try and get a copy of the same and just see the kind of teachings and the kind of preparations the teachers are given. Then we also have talked about teenage girls going to school, but what happens to their children at that early stages, because they are still also the mothers. So one of the interventions that FAWE has looked at is that these children still are not left behind for purposes of gender equality. And so we look at the caregivers being trained and supported, while the teenage girls are supporting the reentry policy, they are back in school, but also their caregivers are trained so that they are able also to train their children, the teenage mothers' children, on gender norms, and basically also checking on their play, because we realize that children play also has a big impact on their final assumption of their gender norms or gender roles. Then we also have informal education. I didn't hear much of that being talked about. Reaching out to mothers who didn't go to school, but they have children who they are taking to school. We need to equip them with some literacy skills starting from home. This we've had successes in Burkina Faso, Guinea, Kenya, and Liberia, where you train also the mothers even as they bring up their children, because it's in the same homes where they start by giving assignment to their boys or girls differently. So if you're able to have these literacy skills for them and also create awareness on why it's important for them to have equal opportunities for both their girls and boys at that very early age. Then we also have regional and global advocacy that is something that you're coming up. I think today has been a great day for us to hear about the African Early Childhood Network and its support from the AU, HRSG. I think this is something that FAO would also want to join and also contribute to the advocacy work that we have. So finally, maybe on the lessons learned, one of the things that I didn't hear in the presentations is that we've talked a lot about government's role, we've talked about a lot reaching up the children and the teachers, but there's the community level where in most African societies, we say the child belongs to the community. So sometimes even a parent could have the goodwill, but depending on the community surrounding them, it also determines on what the children are taught at that very early stage. So it's one of the key lessons learned by FAWE. And also in terms of mobilization, when you're talking about this early school, you'll notice that not many parents are also very keen about taking their children to school at that very early age. There's that presumption that it's too early for them to learn, but also just increasing that awareness that it's at this point that the children formation and the knowledge happens. So there's a lot of also policy engagement at that level to ensure that it's actually not given less attention, but similar attention to any other formal education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. So far we have seen different papers, very interesting papers. I hope everybody has attended very well. And now we will go to the session, which is question and answer, and that will be moderated by our team member, Argao. So Argao, please try to mention the questions specifically to the presenters, if possible. So with that, the floor is yours, Argao. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the first question is, Hamid was just asked for Anna. To what extent learning assessment mechanisms at national, regional, and international levels are capturing how girls and boys are fairly in terms of performance or achievement? Are there any attempts in policy design to correlate this information with teaching and learning environment, especially Anna, for which was described on the gender? Hello?
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anna, can you react to it?
On my mic. Sorry, can you please repeat? It went very fast. You're talking about assessments in relation to girls' learning?
Argao, can you repeat the question, please?
A bit slower.
Your voice is not heard, please.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, Argao, your voice is not correct.
As we wait for Argao, there was another question from Emmanuel.
Okay. Okay, Argao, it's not, your audio is not proper. So, Victoria, do you have any question?
Yes, I'm picking one question here from Emmanuel. That was, he's, I think, referring to Anne from Kenya. He wanted to know which level does e-learning start in Kenya, and do you have any policy on e-learning in Kenya? There was one on that, and there's another one from also Hamidu. Given there is little uptake of the assessment results and data designing reforms, what could explain this state of affairs in terms of the challenges? and he says that the Kenya experience sounds interesting in bridging assessment results with utilization of planners and decision makers. So maybe Anne Gatia can make a comment on some of those issues that have been raised. Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Regarding the e-learning, I would say that per se, there is no e-learning policy in Kenya. And I would also say that there is no official kind of e-learning for all schools. However, there is a lot of integration of ICT in teaching and learning experiences, where teachers are encouraged to use a lot of the digital devices, where the examinations council also is trying its best to try as much as possible to use the online platforms to reach out to the schools, to reach out to the learners. And even the government ministries are trying a lot in terms of registration to reach out using the IT. But when we come to e-learning, there is an emphasis on the digital learning program or literacy program, but it is not yet there. But we are in the process, yes.
Okay, sorry, there was also a comment on sharing the tools. I think we're interested in your tools, Anne. Is it possible to share some of these tools that you're using? I think that can be done at some point. Whoever is interested can inbox you directly. And then there was the comments from Shem of Adair, and he makes a comment about the diminishing role of regional learning assessment. And he hopes that probably this process can be resuscitated. Yes, I think we cannot say much on this forum, but we take note of your observation around that. Now, I'm quickly running through. And yes, for those that are requesting for the presentations, you're going to share, as we've always done, the presentations, and also share the video recording. Okay, now a colleague from Rwanda, from the ministry, also wishes to share more experiences. I think we have to create a platform to share more country experiences on learning assessments. It looks like there's so much that is happening, and indeed we'll be glad to hear from you and from all the other partners that have got something to share. I'm trying to look for the issue that was raised for Anna. There was, okay. The issue of awareness of national policies and legal frameworks is key to ensuring the rights. Okay, that's a comment. Yeah, indeed, that's a good comment. Okay, I think for now we can leave it at that as we move forward, because we don't have the time. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you, Victoria. Really. So if there is someone who has urgent, maybe they can raise one issue. Otherwise, we can pass. Very urgent issue to be considered.
Yes, let me just, I've picked up the question for learning assessment, both at the regional, national, and international levels, capturing how girls and boys are faring in terms of performance. That is for Anna Muru. They're asking to what extent.
Victoria, can you repeat it? Your sound is a bit interrupting. Victoria, can you repeat once? Yeah, sorry.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Do you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Okay. The question was, to what extent assessment capturing or comparing how girls and boys are faring in terms of performance? Are there any attempts in policy design to do this correlation also with teaching and learning environments? That is the question that was being thrown to Anna Muru of VBB.
Okay, thank you so much. Anna, can you reflect on it?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, you were breaking up, but I think I got the gist of that. I think it's all about the EMIS system needing to capture the data regarding performance for girls and boys, and also looking at what other data supports the learning environment. So what kind of data is being collected? And in some systems, we do have data that is quite accurate and that does have that information. But it really depends on the design of the EMIS system, because that's what we have in most of our countries, the EMIS system. And so you can see that there's some correlations. For example, if you're looking at the teaching and learning environment, you will find that girls in rural areas perform worse than girls in urban areas, because maybe the facilities related to wash are not in place, or because they have to walk long distances to their homes, or because, for example, there is no running water at the institution, or simply because it's far away from where they stay. So there is that data, and there is already some information related to that. Of course, how these can be are then acted upon is what is really required. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So, is there any other? Maybe. If there is no any, let us conclude this session and then pass to the next session, and that will be facilitated by Chelsea. Chelsea, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tile. Again, in the interest of time, Dr. Tile, I know you have a great presentation prepared for us. Would it be possible to give you the floor for 2 to 3 minutes just to summarize the main takeaways from your presentation? And then we can pass to the concluding remarks, because we have already gone by the time. I hope that is okay for you.
Yes, I can do it. No problem. Yeah, thank you. Maybe Henok can help me just to display the PowerPoint. Henok?
Yes, okay, I'm uploading.
So, as a whole, this is the plan of action and the methodology part of the upcoming detail or in-depth capacity scanning, as well as priority scanning for the countries. So we are doing this one because one of the requirements of the KIX Hub is to conduct rigorous research to produce country profiles with regard to the 6 thematic areas, and then share it to the member countries as well as the partners. That is, in response to this, we have planned to conduct it in a very short time. It must start as of next week. But in order to do this, maybe you can go ahead, Henok, pass to next slide. So go ahead again. Yeah. Move forward. Yeah. So anyway, the key issues to be considered in this exercise is just to understand the very purpose of the scanning and the detailed mapping process, and the responsibility bodies and how it's going to be conducted, and when it is going to be conducted. These are the key issues to be considered in this presentation. But as far as the purpose, I highlighted, this scanning process involves 2 key activities. First is conducting desk review, thorough desk review, to understand the existing body of knowledge in the form of policies, in the form of strategies, in the form of best practice, in the form of research outputs of individual countries as well as partners. And then the other one is conducting face-to-face interviews or telephonic conversations in order to get the picture of what is existing in the country and what is planned in the near future as well as in the long time. So we have to accumulate this information and then compile it to produce what is called the country profile with regard to the 5 thematic areas, and if the need arises beyond this also. So this is the thing. So how are you going to do this? We are going to do it in, we have designed methodology. The methodology is the first in terms of research design. We are using the mixed approach, applying both quantitative and qualitative. And we are collecting data, as I said to you earlier, from primary and secondary source. And we are using different data gathering tools like desk review or documentary analysis, survey questionnaire, a structured interview, as well as workshop methods to collect data. What as far as desk review is concerned, we are focusing on very essential documents like latest policy and planning documents, GP priority result frameworks, and some thematic area studies if there are existing studies and compilations carried out by the countries, individual countries, sectoral analysis and evaluations conducted by different stakeholders, and research published locally and internationally. So in order to get these documents, we are tracing different resources, sources. These are, among others, the ministries of each country, the GP country webs, the UNESCO, UNICEF, African Union Commission, IDRC, and other bilateral organizations' websites, KIX Hubs, leading research institutes in the country or universities, and who will be, as far as collecting primary data is concerned, who will be our primary targets? We are targeting on monitoring, planning, monitoring, evaluation officers of each ministry or directors, and senior technical officers, and thematic leads, 6 area thematic leaders, and other important personalities. And education partners in the country, teacher associations, and others. So how are you going to collect the data? We may design the tools which are...
I apologize, Dr. Tile. Could you please wrap up in just one more minute, please?
Thank you, I'll do that. So I think the most important thing I would like to highlight today is what will be the role of every stakeholders around this exercise. Well, as you have been quite aware of, and you have been informed, this is a joint exercise. Nobody will take the responsibility solely, but every stakeholder is part and parcel of the exercise, which are carried out or undertaken under KIX Hub. So in this case, we have identified regional advisory team members, regional technical team, and consortium members, and DCP coordinating focal points, and GP chapters, as well as KIX Hub staff. So particularly, since the KIX staff is very limited in size, so because of this, we have to share different responsibilities, particularly in collecting primary and secondary data. So we have assigned different responsibilities to different stakeholders. You will get this copy, and then accordingly we'll communicate. And on behalf of the KIX Hub, I would like to say I'm very happy to work with you, and then I will communicate these things and others on the way forward. Thank you. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tile, for highlighting the main points and emphasizing that we will all work together on this. As you mentioned, we'll make sure that this is shared, this PowerPoint is shared with all of the participants today. Now, if we could please move to the closing remarks, and I would like to invite Dr. Catherine Torre, the Regional Director at IDRC ISARO, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Torre, the floor is yours.
Chelsea, this is Joy Nafungo. Dr. Ture had to leave at 4 p.m. So I'd like to call upon Trisha Wind, who's the KIX program leader, who will make the remarks on behalf of Dr. Ture. Welcome, Trish.
Thank you. And I'm very sorry. Apologies and regrets on behalf of our colleague, Dr. Catherine Toure, who really wanted to be here for the end to convey her best regards. She is passionately interested in education. Her own doctorate is in that domain. So while she is the regional director for the IDRC office that is based in Nairobi, oversees programming in lots of different thematics, education is so close to her heart. So I know that she wishes that she could maybe participate in additional meetings and be able to convey her own regards. So I think what I will do in the interest of time is offer to share her written remarks with you so that you can hear what she wanted to say. And I myself, as the program leader for the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange overall within the International Development Research Center, just to leave you with maybe 3 things. And the first of all is thank you. I really appreciate this meeting. I really appreciate ICBA and the consortium members' dedication to making KIX work in this whole virtual environment that we all find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. Really appreciate the fact that there are 38 people online, even past the normal closing time for this meeting, because you're interested in the opportunities to share knowledge and innovative approaches across countries for education. So really appreciate this meeting. I like the overviews that we heard from Talent, from FAWE, from VVOB, and then also a country-specific example from Kenya about not only what are the broad issues, but what are the approaches that a country is trying. And I really appreciate the comment from Rwanda saying that you would like to be able to share what's going on and the very particular questions that are coming up in the chat. That's exactly what KIX is for, is to understand what are the broad challenges that are existing in the countries that are supported through the Global Partnership for Education, and how can we learn from each other about innovative approaches to address them. So in order to make KIX effective, I think there are 2 things beyond appreciation that I wanted to express, is that thank you for all the KIX focal points that are online right now. And thank you too for your commitment, and I know that this has been shared with you, to broaden out the national delegations into the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange. That these meetings would include the KIX focal points, but over time grow into a broader set of stakeholders who would be connecting in with KIX opportunities at national level. And then across nations. So looking forward to expanding out those national delegations, starting with the KIX focal points who are online. And then the second point is just to follow on the last presentation about the country mapping exercise, because of course KIX needs to be relevant to the concerns and the opportunities that are in the GPE member countries across this region. And so this country mapping exercise is going to ask you to engage and provide data and give your experiences. And it's on the basis of that this regional KIX hub is going to continue its own agenda for knowledge sharing and analysis and research. It's also going to inform a call for proposals that IDRC will launch, asking for projects that will take some of those shared policy challenges that cut across Africa 19 and the countries in this hub, and ask for projects that will help develop new knowledge, document innovative approaches, and more importantly, figure out how can we scale the impact of things that work in these countries that are members of the Africa 19 hub. So that call for proposals is something that IDRC will run, but it's based on the work that is being led now by the KIX hub to figure out what are the most crucial issues that require new knowledge and innovative approaches. So with that, I just commend to you our thanks for this meeting, but also your ongoing connection. And we really do want to make sure that KIX is useful to national education systems across the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your very substantive closing remark. So participants, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. This is the time, I think we took extra time, and on behalf of the team, I would like to apologize, and I appreciate you for your patience. Thank you so much. We will meet next time. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.